Good morning. I'm David Goldsmith. I'm a part-time associate professor of textiles here at Parsons. On behalf of my colleagues, Professor Tamara Albu and Luciana Scrutchen, the director of the AAS Fashion Design Program, we are delighted to welcome everybody, especially our speakers and roundtable participants who have come from France, Switzerland, California, Rhode Island, Maine, and Washington State to coloring fashion, natural and synthetic dyeing in textiles today. We want to thank the New School Provost's Office and the School of Fashion for providing funding for this event, which is part of the current Parsons Festival. And we are very happy this morning to have with us David Van Zandt, the president of the New School, who will greet us in a moment. First, I want to give you a little background to how we've come to this symposium. Last year at this time, Tamara, Luciana, and I were fortunate to be attending the International Symposium and Exhibition on Natural Dyes in La Rochelle, France. At that week-long event, we learned quite a lot of fascinating information about historic and contemporary aspects of natural dye in textiles, clothing, cosmetics, and food. As educators in the fashion field, the three of us are very aware of the broad, perhaps paradigmatic shifts toward sustainable fashion, even if we don't know yet what sustainable fashion is. Nonetheless, there is no doubt that we are trying to at least become responsible for what we design, produce, market, and wear. Our growing responsibility acknowledges that meaningful fashion today must also try to protect and restore our ecosystems, bring about social equity, create new models of prosperity that supersede our antiquated consumption-based economic system and support human diversity and cultural vitality. That is a terribly heavy assignment for a dress, a pair of pants, or a suit to fulfill, on top of asking these same garments to be attractive, expressive, affordable, and relevant to our times. In fact, the boggling task of understanding these sustainability issues in relationship to fashion practices is what Tamara, Luciana, and I were reflecting upon over a bottle of wine, of course, in France, last spring after having heard numerous presentations about the aesthetic, economic, environmental, and cultural values and trends connected with natural color. Recognizing that to make progress towards sustainable and beautiful fashion systems, whatever those turn out to be, we must carefully and deliberately consider every element that goes into those systems. Tamara, Lucia, and I thought it would be useful to our students, ourselves, and our guests to focus on just one of the current debates that is going on in the fashion world: the pros and cons of natural and synthetic dye. Today, we are very fortunate to have with us a panel of internationally recognized experts, entrepreneurs, and visionaries. Before their presentations and the roundtable discussion, each of our guests will be more properly introduced. But at this time, I would like you to at least meet our panel: Tom Chappell, the founder of Rambler's Way, 100% American wool comfort wear, and co-founder of Tom's of Maine body care products. Jody McKenzie, the master dyer for Rambler's Way and owner of Botanical Shades. Linda Gross, hi, a practicing artist. So that's from the wrong idea. A practicing designer, consultant, and assistant professor at California College of the Arts. Laura Sansone, and here's where the artist comes in, designer and adjunct professor at the School for Design Strategies here at Parsons. Anne de la Sayette, our first speaker, who leads the Center of Research, Innovation, and Technology Transfer in Horticulture in Rochefort-sur-Mer, France. Yoshiko Iwamoto Wada, a scholar, curator, artist, and founder of Slow Fiber Studios. Peter Weber, the CEO and founder of Blue Sign Technologies, Environmental and Occupational Health Standards. Michelle Whiplinger, natural dye expert and owner of Earth Hues Natural Dye. And one more presenter who will be joining us soon, Martin Bide, who is from the University of Rhode Island Textiles, Fashion Merchandising and Design Program, and is the former president of the American Association of Textile Colorists and Chemists. Thank you, and David Van Zandt will speak to us for a moment.
Well, you sound like, David, you have a great program in line for today, and I think that's really tremendous. I just want to thank Luciano, Tamara, and David. These things, you know, they have other jobs to do, and these things take a lot of effort to pull together. So let's start out by giving them a hand. So. I'm the president of the New School overall, and the two real principles of the New School are fit right in here. They're really creativity and innovation, and second, public engagement and social responsibility. And I think what you're talking about today is a great mix of two. In fact, everything that goes on at Parsons and at the New School generally is all about that. So I hope you enjoy the conference today. I urge the visitors who are not from the New School to just take a walk around. We've got some great displays of student work. It's the end of the school year, and many of the seniors have put on tremendous projects. So we're at the start of festival, at the Parsons Festival, so it's a great time for the school. So please take advantage of it. And lastly, I hope it doesn't rain too much today while you're here. So thank you, and have a great conference.
Thank you.
Thank you, David. Tamara, would you like to take a few words about how the day is going to progress? Okay, so I would like to introduce our first speaker, Anne de la Sayette, who joins us from France. As David mentioned, Anne is an eminent agro-engineer who leads the Center of Research, Innovation, and Technology Transfer in Horticulture in Rochefort, France, and I'm sure I butchered that name. Thank you. Thank you, Anne.
Ladies and gentlemen, as you can hear, I came from France, so I apologize for my accents and vocabulary. Thank you, Luciana, Tamara, David, for inviting me. It's a joy to see some friends 1 year later, so welcome with me. I will introduce you to the history and basic principles and practices of textile dyeing. I am the first speaker. Others will precise my speech later. Quickly, as you know, natural dyes has been used until the middle of 19th century for thousands and thousands of years, of course. They came mainly from vegetal sources or animal sources. I should have had mineral sources, of course, but for textile, mainly they were from vegetal sources. The most well-known was madder roots, wood leaves, and Persian berries. Some example, I should have thousands of slides, just to show you that those natural dyes were used all over the world in every culture. And as you can see, the colors are absolutely beautiful. That's the first important point. You can have all colors with natural dyes, all colors. Then we go fast to the 17th century, textile industry in Europe grew up, and it's interesting there is an important notion. Natural dyes were divided in two parts. One part was, I don't know the translation, in fact, grand teint. It means colors who have a very good light fastness. We tell in Europe grand teint, and the other one were petit teint, little color. And it was very well known all over Europe, and Colbert have made and write a very strict regulation on the use of colors. Grand teint colors were only used for court fabrics, and the other one for all other used. Then we came to 19th century, textile industry revolution and development of colorant chemistry. It's funny to notice that the first synthetic color, mauveine, you know mauve color, was discovered accidentally. William Henry Perkin was an Englishman, and he was doing something else, and he came to a color. And then in 1868, important date, it is the first synthesis of a natural dyes, alizarin. Alizarin is a molecule, a red molecule, and it looks like the mother molecule. I will make a stop there. Synthetic dyes mainly have one pure molecule. With natural dyes, for example, with madder, I will explain how we made natural madder extract. In madder, there are more than 22 different colors molecule. It's a mix of different colors. And with other natural dyes, it is the same. Mainly, they are mixed of several molecules. And when you made an extract, you will have less or more than one or another one. That's why natural dyes are so various. And it's like a wine, in fact. When you make an extract 1 year, you will pick up the madder, you make an extract, and you will have those 22 different molecules. With the synthetic dyes, you are a pure one. It's an important difference between both, and it's explained why it is so difficult to standardize natural dyes. Then there is a mass production of synthetic dyes, and another important thing is that progressive disappearance of dye plants cultivation and disappearance also of know-how. Very quickly, within 100 years, people forget how to cultivate natural dyes, how to use them, how to make extract, except, of course, in some countries with craft people, but mass production of natural dyes vanish. Another point also, well, I will come that a bit after. Then I explain our project. 20 years ago, we start to work on natural dyes development. I am an engineer in agronomy, and we come to natural dyes with wondering about biodiversity and plant cultivation. But as those natural dyes has vanished, we make very soon a multidisciplinary team, and we work on natural dyes with different point of view: history, botany, agronomy, biochemistry, industrial process. I should have had fashion, but we are not fashion and designer, you are. And we start a big project in the east of France, which is, I think, the biggest project and realization in Europe now on natural dyes. That's why we organize the last big symposium. We are located on the west coast of France, on La Rochelle, not New La Rochelle, but old La Rochelle, on the seaside, on the Atlantic coast, in front of New York, on the other side. We have first work on raw material. It takes 10 years to learn how to cultivate those natural dyes, but with modern methods. In fact, those natural dyes and plants are old plants and colors, but we have to make with modern way. That's the challenge. So we make a selection of plants with high color level, a lot of comparison between varieties. For example, for madder, I take this example again. We test more than 50 different varieties of madder coming from Mediterranean area, but there are other madder in Japan, other madder in America. We made fertilization harvesting method comparison, and we have, for example, we have to harvest those natural dyes with a machine, of course, not by hand. So transfer production of dye plants with farmers, it takes 10 years, and we have contract with farmers. Some example of raw matter. You will, I think we will see those plants within the day, so I stop here. Coreopsis tinctoria, it is Latin name, no? Yes. Cosmos, but perhaps you know Cosmos. Cosmos came from North America. Rubian tinctorium is madder, okay? In each part of the world, you have a precise pieces of madder. Dyer's broom, Persian berries, Solidago canadensis is golden rod, very well known in Canada. Another very important is weld. Polygonum tinctorium is a blue one, as Isatis tinctoria is wood indigo. So in each part of the world, there are also indigo plants, very different. In our temperate climate, we have the wood, is that the right pronunciation? Isatis tinctoria. In a tropical country, you have Indigofera tinctoria, which is a very well-known one. What is interesting to notice is that with natural dyes, you don't use only flowers, of course. You can use each part of the plant. For example, for madder, you use the roots, only the roots. Color is concentrated in the roots. For dyer's broom, you use all the aerial part, okay? For cosmos, you use the flowers. For Persian berries, you can use either the berries, either the wood. So we cultivated now all those varieties on big scales. And it was hard work to learn how to harvest them. For example, this is a madder harvesting with a mix of onion and potatoes machine we make. So we have to invent a machine for those natural plants because there were not. Cosmos harvesting. That is sorgho. Sorgho is, as you can notice, it looks like maize, yes? But this sorgho is a blend between an African variety and a French one. We made a special variety with a certificate. And the harvesting is like maize, yes? That is dyer's broom. And other raw material, of course, we purchased in tropical countries. You know cochineal from South America and from the island of Spain island, Balear, and so on. Logwood. Logwood came mainly from Mexico, but perhaps Michel will speak of that this afternoon. There are some difficulties to have some logwood nowadays. That's why we have now a program to replant logwood in French Antilles, Guadeloupe and Martinique. Old festic is also in danger, so some wood, you must be very careful with the sourcing of the wood. Then we harvest the plants, and we dry them, and then we make extraction of colorant constituent in lab. It takes another 10 years, about. It is hydroalcoholic extraction. So we put the drying and grinding plants in big bowl with high temperature and pH to be definited. It's very difficult to say, to pronounce. With alcohol, the alcohol comes from corn, yes, and we recycle it. So it's a very, very safe extraction and very proper, clean. We obtain a color solution, and then there are two ways of production. First one, you concentrate the color solution, we dry it, and we obtain a soluble dye solution in powder form. I don't bring it with me. It was too difficult at the airport because what is that? But we have some description there. And it's very concentrated. It's for all dyeing application on textile, on paper, on hair, on leather. And then another part are pigment production. When you have the color solution, you fixed it on a charge, a link, something, and pigment became non-soluble. It's used for painting, for cosmetic, and we have some pattern on the pigment because we are the only one who know how to make natural pigment with plants, okay? Then we have partnership with an industrial company in France who is a major company to produce perfume with flowers and plants. And we transfer our know-how, and they made the scallop. So now for example, we give them 1,000 kilo of dry plants, and they make the extraction in big quantity. 1,000 kilos of dry plants will give about between 100 and 200 natural dyes extract. It takes quite a lot of time to do that. But what is interesting to say is that the process is eco-friendly because we use natural alcohol, we recycle the water and alcohol, plant residues are spread in the fields, and the drying process is very poor in energy. It is zeohydratation. If somebody wants after that to have some more detail on zeohydratation, I will give them. Then we have a range of colorants and pigments under powder form, easy to storage, easy to use, concentrated, and we made production upon request. You have the logo here of Couleur de Plante. So the project goes pretty well, and then we have been asked by mainly cosmetic firm to do big batches, and we create a private company, which Couleur de Plante is now our private company, who makes the batches in big quantity and sell the product. I will go on now on textile. Combien de minutes? Okay, it's okay. Ancient recipes. We begin with ancient recipes, mainly from the Middle Age. I absolutely can't translate this because it's old French, but in fact, it's very funny recipes. For example, you have to take a sort of soup and mix it with farine, flour, and then you have to wait. You don't know how many times you have to wait. In some recipes, they explain that you have to wait. With it, that time you have to pray and to recite, to say Pater Noster and Ave Maria during this time, and it's okay. So we measure it, we we have said our prayer. Some are very quick, 2 minutes. I take 5 minutes. Another one take 10 minutes. It's very funny, but in fact, it explains. It's a funny explanation to explain that it was very difficult to translate those old recipes, ancient recipes, but very useful. Modern. For textile, I will focus on mordanting. If you want to dye with the natural dyes, mainly you have to use a mordant. If you put your fabric in water with natural dyes, nothing will go except with indigo. It's another thing. But with all the other colors, nothing happened. You first have to make a mordantic bath, yes, which is very, very important for natural dyes. Mainly alum, natural alum was used. It is a metallic ion, yes, and it fixed on the fiber in the dyeing bath. It's very complex to explain, and I think nobody in the world really understands what happened with mordant in the fiber and how, after that, the colors will fix on fibers and mordant. It's very complicated. And if your fabrics is on cotton or on wool or on silk, apparently the fixation and the complex, it's not the same. Some works have been done with madder on cotton. It's big works. If some student here wants to work on that, it's a very good technique subject. They used different mordant. Ancient mordant was aluminium salt, but they also used copper, iron, chrome, arsenic, and a lot of very dangerous mordant. So in the ancient times, dyeing and painting with natural material was rather dangerous. Of course, in a modern way, we choose the right mordant, which are allowed with a modern regulation. We use aluminium, iron, copper, and titan. The mordant has a great influence on two things. First is the color. For example, the colorant is dyer's broom. If you mordant with titan, it will give you a red color. And with aluminium, it will give a yellow. And if we used copper, it will turn on green. So it's important to notice something very mordant and natural dyes are very important. Fibers is important, 3 parameters. And that's why we have so many mordants. If we want to have all shades of colors, we need a lot of plants, we need a lot of mordants. And mordant is also important for light fastness. We made a 5 years work on light and wash fastness. People say that natural dyes are not strong with fastness. In fact, it depends on fibers, colorants, and mordants. And a lot of natural dyes, in fact, have a good light and wash fastness. So we study more than 40 natural dyes with different fibers and a lot of more than 10 different mordants, very important. And when we sell a natural dyes, we sell the mordant with it and the recipe to have the good color. What is important also to explain that we can mix the colors. We don't have a red, a yellow, and a blue. It is not sufficient. It's not a trichromy way of singing. It's another way of singing than with synthetic dyes. And if you mixed a red with a yellow one, you don't, perhaps you will obtain orange, but not at each time. Perhaps you will turn on brown or turn on green. That's why we have so many colors. We have about 12 main colors, and they can be mixed with different mordants. So we have collaboration with European textile firms. For example, the last one is Bergère de France. Bergère de France is the main company in Europe making knitting. Thank you. And we have made a lot of tests before that. It takes a 1 year work, and we make research and development. We have research and development contract, and then we make scale up. We transfer the process from the lab to the industrial scale, which is a hard work because we have to use the same machine than the ones they have for synthetic dyes. It is yarn, it is wool, and they now have a range of wool pelote. I don't remember the name. Wool yarn pelote. Thank you. Which are now on sale on internet website or in some shops in Europe. Other example of collaboration with textile firms. For no, it was on silk, blue and red. On linen and cotton yarns, and in the law, it is printing in Hermes company, which makes beautiful scarves, and it works very well, but it's not sale. Not on the market, as you can remark, because on a technical aspect, it works very well, but Hermes marketing service say no. Natural dyes, it's not our job. We are on the top. We are very chic, yes, and natural dyes are not so chic. We have to convince that natural dyes are beautiful, and they said it's beautiful. The colorist of Hermes said to us, it's amazing, beautiful, but it's very difficult to sell with a natural dyes marketing point of view. We will see. We hope. It's more easy with cosmetic firm, and we start to work, in fact, with cosmetic 20 years ago with L'Oréal. When they see that we were working on natural dyes, they come and they buy the research and development works of our center for 5 years. Now we are free. For cosmetic, we use pigment. You remember we have soluble dyes and we have pigment which are not soluble in water, but you can mix them in cosmetic products, lipstick and eyeshadow and the cream. And here is a project with Chanel. We are very proud of that because we make a beautiful red for Chanel for lipstick, and it will be on the market on next September all over the world. So go to to see and to use. It is with sapanwood. Sapanwood is a tropical wood from Indonesia. So we work with a village in Indonesia, and we buy the sapanwood, which are used to make the fence. Okay, and when the fence are out, we buy the old one, and we make a beautiful red, which is not very interesting for textile because the light fastness is not very high. But of course, for lipstick, light fastness is not so important because you are not going to have your lipstick for 2 weeks. It's very short utilization, yes. That's why cosmetic is very interesting. And I think natural dyes are pushed by cosmetic industry, in fact, more than by textile. Perhaps also they have more money to do development, of course. We can also use natural dyes for painter and biomaterial. Biomaterial, you know, that bioplastic for bags. And it works very well. We are very surprised with bioplastic because pigments were had in a natural plastic mixture, and the temperature is very high. It's more than 200 degrees Celsius. And the pigment stay very, very well. Other use are for fine art and craft and decoration for general public. It is the logo of Couleur de Plante. I have some information there. You can take that. You can use the ink, or if you want to test to dye in your bathroom, in your kitchen, you can test those natural dye extracts. And we have an explanation how to use it. If you want to begin something with natural dyes, it's the best way. And then the last photo, I am in time, yes? 1 minute, perfect. It was last year's symposium. I have hundreds of photos, so beautiful. I can't resist to give you this, to show you this photo. It was, and I have some DVD of the proceeding of the last symposium, which are very interesting because you have the lectures, video, film, and a lot of things. If you want that, I have some with me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So before Luciana is going to introduce the next speaker, I'd like to take a few moments to let you know what we are going to do for the entire day. So as you know, some of you register for both sessions, the morning and the afternoon. So the morning session will, we already had Anne, and the next will be Tom Chappell, then Martin Byde, and we will end the morning session with Michelle Wiplinger. Then we are going to have a break for lunch at 12 o'clock, and we will start the afternoon session at 1:15. And we have 3 more speakers after lunch break. Yoshiko Yamamoto first, Yoshiko Yamamoto Wada first, then Peter Weber, and we are going to have Linda Gross closing the guest speakers' presentations. We are going to have a very brief break just to, get a little circulation, blood circulation going, and some refreshments. For 15 minutes, and finally we will have a round table where all the speakers will be able to take questions from the audience, and we hope that we are going to have a very interesting dialogue. At the end of the day, if we stay in time, we should be done around 4:15. We are going to have a book selling in the room 105. I mean, it's kind of, we will guide you through the ramp and down near the gallery. And of course, you are welcome to look around and see the students' exhibitions. As David mentioned, this is part of the Parsons Festival, so you will see very interesting work on display. And that will conclude our session. Then we are going to have our speakers for the rest of the day, just for us. So thank you very much. Luciana? Yes. Very brief questions. So we are going to hold the large questions for the afternoon roundtable. But if you have any specific questions that you would like to ask Anne before we introduce the next speaker, go. We have about 5 minutes for that. So we just want to stress that whomever wants to ask questions, you need to wait until we'll give you the mic, because the entire session is recorded, so that's very important for us. Don't start asking until we give you the mic. All right? Yes? So let me just take it. It's over there.
I'm curious about the future direction then of your research, where you're going next.
Yeah, mordant, as you understand, perhaps natural mordant, because some plants are natural mordant, but not so good at metallic mordant, okay? And sourcing. Be very careful with the sourcing. And then pigment, because there are a lot of ways to make pigments. You can use a lot of different medium to make pigments, which are our main research.
Anybody?
What would be an example of a plant with a natural mordant?
Natural mordant, you know? You
No,
mean?
what would be an example of one plant that has its own mordant?
Tannin plant. Tannin plant, it means wood and flavonoid and tannin plants, like quebracho, you know quebracho, cashew, catechu, I know the Latin word, mainly from wood, okay? Plants who give tannin, you understand tannin? Tannin are natural mordants, some tannin. Mainly.
Hi. Can you just clarify what titan is? Is that tin? T-I-T-A-N-E as a mordant? Is it titanium?
Titanium, yes.
Titanium?
Titanium, yeah.
Is it titanium?
Titanium.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Titanium.
Thank you.
It's allowed. It's absolutely allowed. You can use titanium.
Okay.
And it's very good color.
Okay.
It gives very good color.
I've heard of tin, but not. Okay. That's
You are the
interesting.
only one, and
Thank
you will be the next.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much.
I'd like to introduce our next speakers. Tom Chappell is the founder of Rambler's Way, 100% American wool comfort wear, and also owner-founder of Tons of Maine. He joins us with Jody McKenzie, who is the master dyer of Rambler's Way. Jody also has her own company, owner Botanical Shades, and has been working with natural processes for over 15 years. Thank you.
Good morning. Well, we're delighted to be here. Jody McKenzie has been working with natural dyes for 15 or 16 years, and she'll be part of the panel this afternoon, and she can also answer some questions this morning. I wanted to begin by talking a little bit about the values that we live by at Rambler's Way Farm. We organized about 2.5 years ago. We were founded in late 2009 with the belief that we could provide very fine quality, lightweight wool fabric and garments made here in America, working with a breed of sheep called Rambouillet. Rambouillet is a cousin of the Merino and is a very good-sized sheep, hardy to deal with the conditions of either cold weather regions or arid regions here in the States. They're known for their long fiber and very fine fiber, approximately 18.5 to 19 micron in diameter. This size fiber lends itself to the production of a worsted yarn, so that using a worsted process as opposed to a woolen process, you can get a yarn and ultimately a knitwear or wovenwear fabric that's extremely fine and free of scales that would otherwise be poking and itching against your skin. So it's It's a process designed to produce a very fine quality yarn and fabric. Making products here in America, sourcing everything in America, making them here is only one of our values. Sustainability is an important value, which I had at Tom's of Maine. We were involved in sustainable practices at Tom's back in the 1970s. So when I wanted to start another business, it was my nature to want to find ways to be more sustainable in something that I wanted to bring to the market in a new category, that is apparel. I was interested in apparel because I had been hiking in Wales and couldn't really find in a 12 or 14 mile day farmhouse to farmhouse in many different kinds of weather patterns. I couldn't find anything next to my skin that I was comfortable with. It was either made of wool and was heavy and scratchy, or it was made of a synthetic fiber and was smelly and not very warm. And so I came away with the idea that perhaps we could find a fiber and a fabric that would be comfortable, soft, lightweight, made of wool, so that you get the insulating value of wool, because wool is hollow and provides that thermal barrier to keep heat in and cold out. So we began on those principles. We have our own salespeople calling on independent clothing stores throughout the country. We're in about 250 stores at the moment. These are boutiques of women's wear and men's wear. While I'm speaking, I'm just going to hand around some examples of our product line, and so you can just take some and pass them along. Thank you, Tamara. I appreciate that. And any of those is good for representation. So we are a family-owned business. Our supply chain of ranchers, of Rambouillet, of the textile companies here in the United States, the people that scour, comb, and card the fibers, that spin into yarn, and that make knitwear fabric. All of these companies are family-owned companies. The whole supply chain here in the States very much is made up of family-owned, sometimes 3 and 4 generations deep. The textile industry has essentially gone, but what remains is still very good. I'm very, very happy to say that we have world-class textile processors here in the States. We can make very fine quality textiles in the States. We sell to independents as opposed to chains, and so we are purposely staying in this face-to-face relationship world of dealing with people who appreciate quality, creativity, and are prepared to pay a little more than what is generally available on the market. So what I'd like to do with that kind of a background is talk about some of the challenges that we've had because of sustainability. We naturally want to work with natural dyes. We located Jody, and although Jody had not worked on fabric, together we learned how to make a commercial scale operation with paddle machines that can do a couple of hundred garments at a time, smaller machines that can do smaller amounts, and then of course the kettles for indigo. So we do indigo and we do the other colors in a continuous stainless steel kinds of equipment. We have had the problems because we are dealing with garment dyeing, and by the way, the reason that we have created our own dye house is because no one could do natural dyes on a commercial scale basis. So we've created a commercial scale natural dye process. Some of the problems we've had, number one, are shrinkage control. When you're working with garments, it's all about getting, after you've been working with it for hours at 200 degrees Fahrenheit, then you've obviously, especially with wool, but it wouldn't be any different with cotton, you've got to end up with a pattern dimension that when you say you're shipping a small and a medium and a large and you hang them on the shelf in the boutique, that indeed the medium isn't bigger than the large. And we've shipped lots of mediums that are bigger than larges. Learning about shrinkage control is just an enormous hassle. But you learn, you figure it out, and it can be an expensive process. So garment dyeing in and of itself has its own complications. Consistency from one batch to the next, if we're working with madder red, for instance, and we have a 4-ounce garment, we can't put the 4-ounce garment in with a 5-ounce garment because the madder won't look the same on the two garments. But even if you're working with a batch of 4-ounce T-shirts and followed by another batch of madder, you can't be totally confident that the shades will be identical because the wool itself might have come from different parts of the country in the raw material itself. It isn't necessarily a problem that you have with your own process, but what you're working with. And so once again, you have to tell your customer, and we do it with a little card with each of our garments, that working with natural dyes may create variations in color, variations on the garment, variations from batch to batch. These are things that are important to communicate as part of a natural process. The most important challenge that we've had working with natural dyes is cost. What we find in bringing a product line, a fine quality product line to good quality boutiques is that people love the idea of made in America. There really is a groundswell in this country to seek out products that are made here. And thanks to us as consumers, you and I, we are seeking out made in America, and the retailers know that. So the movement for local and made in America are very important movements to bringing back this business, this industry to this country. But having said, having talked about made in America and a very fine fiber and sourcing throughout the United States, having said all of that and doing things that are sustainable, the problem is everybody wants to pay prices that are global prices. They do not want to pay more for natural. And I don't mean to say that that's absolute. I'm just saying that once you get into the commercial world, and what I'm talking about is going beyond 100 pieces, going beyond 10 pieces of craftsmanship, of working with natural dyes, but getting into 200, 500, 1,000 pieces of producing garments with natural dyes that you then need to put into the marketplace. The marketplace is not yet ready to pay a significant premium for natural dyes. They will pay a premium for made in America, not much of a premium, a slight premium. They don't know what sustainability means, and they're lukewarm about natural dyes. I've just returned from a week in Japan in which I researched our opportunities, and there's no doubt that Japan understands sustainability fundamentally because they have such a large population on such a small piece of land that they've learned to live differently than Americans, and sustainability is a very real concept. For us to be bringing a product line from America is very attractive, but if it didn't have natural dyes in it, it would be incomplete. So for them, paying a premium, made in America, natural dyes, high quality, the #1 concern for them is sustainability and natural dyes. So we're going to have these problems in regions of the country depending upon the culture's concerns and so forth. We have, and I don't know how I'm doing on time, but about 5 minutes. How am I doing, Tamara? About 5? Okay, great. What I want to emphasize that we're not also working with natural dyes just because it's sustainable, but we're also doing it because of the incredible luster. You can just tear that open and pass it around. These dyes are from southern France. These are couleur de plants dyes that we're working with. We buy, what's that? Yeah. Yeah. And this is my favorite. This is the goldenrod from southern France. And that is a 5-ounce. That is a 5-ounce Rambouillet fabric. The French madder is down here. And then by the time you get to the indigo, it seems quite boring. But anyway, most men like indigo. I'll pass that up there, David. Just so you're looking at the real thing, and these shirts will sell for $125 to $150. In a world where the cotton version would be $59 or a polo shirt for $49 or $39, and we're well up over $100. So for us to succeed, we've got to go to a marketplace that can afford what we do. We're commercial, but we're also creative. It is the innovation that is giving us the difference. There is no one doing what we're doing in the apparel business. And we have no choice but to, and the retailers want to work on their maximum margin ever. So I guess the point I want to make that when we are bringing on innovations commercially, we've got to find those channels of distribution that value innovations. They value quality, they value creativity, they value individuality. And when you tell your story of sustainability, they value that. So we are purposely staying out of the chains, building a business throughout the United States with the independents, because it's a relationship world. When you're selling, your own salespeople are out there making calls every day, face to face. It's a relationship world. And that's where you can help educate. What we learned in the early stages of developing our products is people couldn't believe that it was wool. It felt so soft and lightweight, they couldn't believe it was wool. And then they would wear it, and then they wouldn't take it off. And they would wear it for 5 days before they got a little uncomfortable. Maybe they should wash it. But the truth was they didn't need to wash it because wool is antimicrobial and it absorbs the odors that the germs that cause odor, and you don't smell with wool. But having said all of that, we have a fundamental problem of bringing a wool product that feels and acts like cotton but has the benefits of wool and has the luster, and that's the point I wanted to make, the beauty of the natural dyes. And we talk about this madder red coming from southern France and this goldenrod coming from southern France. And we have lots of other colors you can see in the line sheets there. And this is fascinating to independent shopkeepers. Totally fascinating. It's fascinating to a buyer of a department store, but then where does that difference, that point of difference, get communicated? So what we're facing right now is the reality that a made in America, sustainably made apparel with natural dyes will not support the kind of premium that it requires, nor the margins that we require as a company. So our research isn't how to make the natural dye look beautiful or to how to make the garment look beautiful. It's to how to make it affordable. And that's where we are in our research while we're paying payroll. The money's running, just running right out of the sides of the business while we're doing our best to contain how do we please customers with our values while we try to make money at it. So those are some of the challenges. We're excited to be with the challenges. We may have to, by the way, I want to say that we have tried, we have a research relationship with the North Carolina State College of Textiles, and they have tried to use our natural dyes on yarns. And I wanted you to hear this because I saw your collaboration. We have not been successful in package dyeing or the dyeing of our natural dyes on yarn. The molecules have proven to be too large. So if you're doing that, we're going to get right together on that topic, because if we can dye on yarns, we have a huge step up from dyeing in garments. In this country, if we could dye in the wool stage, we'd have a huge leg up. But there is no operation in the United States that dyes wool while it's still in the raw wool, even clean wool stage. So we have a ways to go to bring the technologies to textiles back to this country that exists very strongly in China and other parts of the globe. But as long as the American consumer is asking for made in America and they are showing a preference for choices that are sustainable, the consumers will have their way. Consumers always have their way. But that also means there is a difference between Whole Foods and Trader Joe's, and that's why people love a deal at Trader Joe's. They're going to want a deal on Rambler's Way someday, a lower price. Let me leave it there and thank you all, and see if you have a question.
I have a couple of questions. Where is your factory located? Where's the dyeing done?
We are located in Maine, and our dye house is in Saco, Maine. Our offices are in Kennebunk. The factories that we work with are pretty much located in the Carolinas, scouring, spinning, and knitting, for instance.
But the dyeing is in Saco?
The dyeing is in Maine, yes.
Can we visit?
Yes, if we can arrange it, all we need to do is arrange it. So we are in the process of looking for a smaller dye house. So by the end of this calendar year, I'm hopeful that we will be in much smaller quarters, because one of our problems on cost is that we simply have too large a facility. Mm-hmm. But by all means, contact us at Rambler's Way and let us know when you'd like to visit, and we'll do our best to accommodate you.
My other question was, I live in Vermont, right on the Vermont-New Hampshire border, so close to you. And
yeah.
You must know about the company Ibex.
Oh, yes, I do.
All the rage where I live. And,
yeah.
They seem to be doing very well at this high
I think they are doing well. They have a lovely product line, too.
Not natural dyes.
Not natural dyes, and not all made in America, either. Yes.
I'm sorry, I have a question.
Okay. Yes.
I'm most impressed by what you're doing and your mission
Thank you.
statement. I was wondering, what do you consider a sustainable growth for you as a company? Because, I mean, you're still very much under the radar. I mean, a lot of it is word of mouth. I mean, one little ad in Wall Street Journal or New York Times every once in a while. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people have not heard of you, and maybe we in the industry or come across and research this. So I was wondering, because you're challenged by costs of merino, Rambouillet yarn and wool, have you considered maybe looking into cotton, that it's also made in U.S., organic cotton from the same sources you're using in Carolinas, to kind of offset the costs of other materials?
Well, those are wonderful questions. We are looking into Pima cotton. And we will be introducing Pima cotton next spring. Once again, the problems we run into are who is there to produce. Now, our knitter in North Carolina will be knitting our Pima cotton, but I want to go into wovens too. I mean, basically, when you have wool, you've got to have a spring and summer business. There just isn't a wool business in spring and summer. And I'm not used to that because plaque grows every day in people's mouth. And I don't like seasonal businesses.
I have a question, just
Yes.
a quick question. So what is the strength of the wool? I mean, I understand, you know, the integrity.
What are the advantages, do you mean? Or
No, the strength of the physical strength of, I mean, it is the construct of the actual fabric, because it is such an innovative fabric. I'm kind of curious about
Are you talking about the
the samples that are being passed around, the worsted.
Yes, well, these Worcester sample, the 4 ounce is quite an innovation in itself. Let's see, the indigo is the 4 ounce, or is that the rib? The rib. So French madder. The French madder is our 4 ounce. This is quite an achievement. This is something that the knitting industry told me they couldn't do. But what we wanted was as little material spread across as much surface as possible with a fiber that didn't itch. And what we've ended up with is a garment that you don't even know is on your body, and yet it's there to protect you all day long, whether you're in air conditioning or wherever. You can physically tear that apart. There are vulnerabilities in some of the knitting operation, which we don't see until after we dye it. So we have to have quite a careful inspection process to pull out those garments. And we see a lot of imperfections after the dyeing process. But, with the 5 ounce product, it's a 2-ply yarn, and an even finer yarn. It's a 2-ply 80 yarn in wool. And the weight is 5.5 ounce. You can't tear that apart. It's just very, very durable. But the 4 ounce is vulnerable, but it's we're staying with it. We've made a 4.5 ounce, but I don't like it as much. We really have hit something unique with this extremely lightweight and soft 4 ounce fabric.
I realize that you have tons of questions. We are going to take the last one from Linda. And please do come for the round table when you'll have a chance to ask a lot more questions and that more length answers. All right? Thank you. So, Linda, you're the last one.
Hello. Thanks very much. Very inspiring presentation. This question of price often comes up when working with sustainability. And one of the things that people pay for is good design, and it's never factored in. It's, you know, when people say, "Oh, consumers will pay 20% more for a cotton t-shirt," I mean, you know, organic cotton, for example, it never includes design. So my question to you is that they're beautifully tailored pieces, and I was wondering, as you pursue this price hurdle, are you looking to do things like, perhaps space dye, or perhaps blend cotton and wool together to create different patterns, or, you know, like Patagonia, for example, when they did organic cotton, their prices came into line on their non-commodity items first, you know, their plaid shirts and so on. So that was are you opening up the different design?
Yes, thank you. That's a good question. My daughter, Eliza Chappell, is a student here at Parsons, and she's taking her, not finals, or is finals, but she's in class. She's in class and can't be here, but she runs our design. And I think we're learning that design makes a big difference on price, and that the design elements can be stripped and cleaned to look elegant, for instance. That's a design decision. Or it can mean something altogether different. And we're learning that does make a difference. And then when it comes to blends, we hope to work with a cotton and wool blend with this new weaver that we've just located. The problem is people in this country don't have the equipment to work with 18-micron fibers, or the yarn counts that are so thin, are yarn counts of single 56 or 2-ply 80 and so forth. But they're very game to try. The fact that Toms of Maine is, part of me is most of the reason that these people have been willing to do things for us. Otherwise, I was just Ramblers Way Farm calling, and they say, "Who is that?" And I've been really grateful for the cooperation we've received from the sheep industry, from the textile industry, so we're making a mark.
Thank you for the opportunity of continuing to discuss natural dyes. They have finally come to the forefront as a viable way to color cloth, all types of cloth, and also to support the indigenous people globally who grow the dyes and make them available to us so that we can work with more than just the synthetic dyes. Both are great, but it's important to look at all levels of the origin of color. Okay, so one of the things that draws me to natural dyes are these particular descriptions that I've written here. I call it rustic chroma, meaning the dyes are variable, they're unusual. I'm using a background that I first dyed with a tannin base, and then I overpainted with other of the dyes. So you get very unusual looks. And earth textures, as I describe them, when you stay close to what the land produces, then I feel like it actually adds to the texture of the cloth. And of course, handmade is something that's very important now, I find, in America, to separate us out from, the things that are mass-produced. And there's often a simplicity within the natural dyes, especially if you look to what the indigenous people have done. So let me start here with the dyes from South America and the United States, and I'll keep myself to that. Oops, excuse me. As you can see, the plant dyes derive from a whole variety of sources, including naturally colored cottons, which people don't often think about. I think Linda Gross knows a fair amount about it because we discussed it quite a while ago. But there are all kinds of plants that are not even all discovered, too numerous to even list. And if you go culture by culture, especially if you're in Laos in Southeast Asia, you're in India, they use the dyes that are traditional in the region. Like if you talk about Turkey and you talk about India, they both have a madder, but two different species of madder. So globally, it's a very really rich source for natural dyes that are sustainably grown, at least the people that we work with. So I started with something that's kind of fun to discuss, and that is annatto. It's a red pigment derived from the achiote tree, Bixa auranea, and it is a dye of the Americas. It is not light fast, so I brought it to you just so you would know that. But it's really important. People in the Amazon use it to color their faces as decorative elements, but other than that, we don't use it. But food, drugs, cosmetics, that might be an application. So I started, this is just like a beautiful picture of the colors of nature. You have to be very careful with flowers. Not all flowers are light fast as you move along. Many are. Weld, of course, is very light fast. It's one of our important yellow dyes. Also Osage orange, which is a dye of the Americas. And that's really important for us to have dyes, not just from other countries. So I'll start with yellow, and because it's, as I said, the most available plant. And the common yellows that we have available to us are the Osage, the Fustic, as I said, the Marigold, and the Weld. And the image that you see here on the left, this is a woman in Thailand that we worked with And so, after they do their dyeing, they go to the river, and of course that's where they clean their yarns and their threads. And I just listed the dyes, and those are some of the colors you get from marigold. Weld is always a blue-based yellow, and then when you get to marigolds, it is much more of a red-based yellow. So they vary dramatically. This is the only sort of art picture that I have, and I put it in just so that you can see the umbered yellows, that they're not all brilliant, and the application of them, the gallotannins and the fustics. Okay, so then I'll talk now about the cultural aspect of these dyes. Let me move my thing along. The Osage yellow is a very important yellow of the United States. And it's been a dye that, given the whole yellow category, which is not ever as light fast, it's among the most light fast, other than weld. Weld is better. But because it's a traditional dye in our country, we wanted to be able to procure it and to be able to use a color that was available in our country. This lets you know what the tree looks like. And what also gives a cachet to this dye is that the tree is invasive, right? And so during the Dust Bowl era, and they were trying to get their crops going, they brought in Osage orange trees to help secure the land. But then what happened, they didn't realize that the root system underneath was so lengthy that they, in fact, invaded the whole area and destroyed some of the crops in the middle part of the country. So it's best used as a yellow dye all the way around. And you can see sort of a sad thing to see a big tree like that being cut. But because of its invasive nature, that's the reason that they were able to cut it. And there's no regulations in the United States about what you do and how you do what you do, which is sad. But because the trees were so invasive, they took them down. But they grow so fast, so they come right back. So it's a dye that we use regularly, and we've used for about 15 years. So it seems to be holding up the availability quite well. You can see the colors. Then moving on, I'll move to indigo, which is a plant that's everybody's favorite plant. And we actually have a blue in the greater of North America, because usually you associate blue with indigo, and you think of especially India, right? Because they have a lot of indigo. But the indigo that we use in the Americas is Indigofera guatemalensis, and they compost their leaves. They use different varieties of indigo, of methods for composting the leaves, and typically they soak the leaves in alkaline water first to break them down. Sometimes they pound them to open them up so they can release the indigotin. They, in particular, in this particular area, they start in the morning. I think we got up, you can see the leaves themselves. We get up almost before light and collect it immediately so that it's still damp. They want a damp leaf, right? And so then it gives more color when you do that. So it's always a morning venture. And then they stuff all those leaves in what I call a brahe. And I'll move this a little. And it's a huge cement tank. And so they stuff the leaves into this tank. Then they put water in it and just let it sit overnight. And then there's one other thing that they do, which I've still not discovered the name of it because it's fairly secretive. They put what they call a gula berry in it. It's just a berry off of a tree. And it has a lot of alkalinity in it, and they pound it. You want me to get closer? Okay. I will. Just a second. I'm trying to figure out, looking at this and that. At any rate, and so they put that in the abrahe. They fill it with water. They let it soak overnight. And then after that period of time, they drain it into a lower cement container, a brahe. So it goes down there, and the leaves and the twigs and everything are left in the top tank, right? So then they move the dye down to there. And at that point, it's filled with a lot of liquid. And then the indigenous people are working there, and the people that actually they own these abrajes, so everything belongs to them. It's not like an indigenous person is brought in. This is their whole structure. And so they come in and they actually put themselves in the tank initially, and they move their feet, and they have paddles to move it around until it's looking good, and then they hop out, and the color's getting better all the time. I mean, they're developing their indigo, and then it goes to the next lower abraje where they finalize the indigo, and after they do that, they finalize the indigo, then it thickens, they let a lot of the moisture evaporate, and so they have a sludge at the bottom, and then they have an opening in the abraje, very wide, right? But it's about like this, that they push it through almost like a broom, right? They push it into a container. Then, very much like they do in India, they've got this sludge, right? This beautiful blue sludge that they've acquired from the plants. And then think about when you make brownies, I guess. That's the best example. You know how you make brownies and you smush it on your pan. That's what they do, but these huge, huge pieces of it actually is kind of a metal, right, that they lay it out and they actually make it sort of a solid. And then as it begins to dry, they chunk it out. Unlike India, where they cut it out into distinct squares, they just chunk it out so that they can get the indigo they need. And then they'll crush it later at another spot. So here you can see a close-up of him pushing it down. Sorry, I'll move this as I move my head. At any rate, it's an arduous task. They do it to this day. This is still how they do the work. Here you can see the leaves floating and the beginning of the indigo color, and that metallic surface is indicating, it's a good concentrated dye. That's after it's drained, the bit of blue that's left. Then they oxidize it by pounding it, beating it, I should say, and then it moves into this dark color. Then they know they have a successful vat. Now, guatemalensis is a different dye, still of the indigo family, but you can see it has a red base, right? So it's a more purple. So as an indigo dyer, and I indigo dye nearly every day, it's very lovely to have two different blues, right? One red-based and one yellow-based, so that when you do your artwork, it's more interesting and gives a richness to the pieces. You can see we have, in guatemalensis, we have 47% indirubin, and in indigo ferritinctoria, 36% indigotin. So there are different kinds of indigo with different colors. And it's lovely that we have that availability in the United States to have those kind of dyes, because typically the association is almost always with India, as I said. So this is how they concentrate. They squeeze it out, get all the really just the water effect out, and then they dry it. These are what the chunks are like. And in their area, this goes to market in that part of the world this way, where they live. But it has to be ground up if they want to sell it at a bigger level, where it's very important for people in North America to be able to use and not have to pound it out themselves. But the people in the abrajes do not do that there. They give it to another group of people. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about an indigo vat. It's quite reduced, I have to say. So this was dyeing in the studio at Earth Use, and we have a standing indigo vat. We never use any different kettle but the same kettle. We never pour the indigo out, so it's a standing vat. We put a lid on it at the end of every day. And then, of course, oxygen enters it, and that's one of the things you need for a good indigo bath. But it's indigo is expensive in the end. It costs a fair amount of money, and so you never want to throw it away. So then what we do is go through the process of reducing the oxygen, right? And then right now we're probably, especially after hearing some of Anne's things, we have to use some chemicals to reduce the oxygen. Time will do it as well. If you chop up food, right, especially leaves and things like that, and you put it in a little bag and you put it in the bottom, right, that sort of rotting that goes on reduces the oxygen that's in there. So that allows us to do it that way. But I don't. I use some chemicals that allow me to reduce the oxygen, and then I move on and I make sure the pH is, is proper there, not too high, not too low. I'm not going to go into a lot of technical things, but we have to look at all those things when we have a standing kettle like that, because it's just so important that the indigo, you never throw it out. So, and that's a tradition that the indigenous people that you see in this image do. They just constantly add the alkaline to it as you move along. And these women use fresh leaves that they pound up, and then they compost them. They put them in these pottery vessels and allow the decayed matter to be, just rot. They put water in it, and then they put alkaline in it, and they keep working it. And it takes 1 month to get all of the color out and to reduce the oxygen that's in there. And as soon as, they have a long, sorry, my hands hit it. They have a whole string of, they'll start with one small vessel, that's pottery, and they'll have 30 of them, right? And because they use natural ferment process, it'll take nearly a whole month as you go all the way down through all the pots. So they can always have a working vat, but they have to always be feeding it as you move along. The people in Southeast Asia, I feel like, are among the best indigo dyers because they pay attention to all of the details of what they have to do, and they have nothing but just what's around them. So they don't have the chemistry, and they don't put a chemical in to reduce it. And it's very different in India. So you can see the process. I just wanted you to see they have a pit that goes down, I forget how many feet, but I always say about 2 people tall, 2 to 3 people tall. And so they dye in that, and they have been doing it, I don't know, I've been going for 30 years, and so they still use the same process. So I wanted you to see the difference culture by culture. And now I want you to look at, excuse me, let me move my notes, the products that are being made with these dyes. That's really important. Now, this is a linen piece, a very fine gauze linen piece that's rumpled, dyed with indigo. And then this is a painted, and this is a very interesting thing to talk to you about, painting indigo. I mean, painting other colors are very easy to do. But this has a very interesting background. It first was painted over with a little bit of yellow in there. Then I painted an indigo in there. And so there's 2 ways to get blue for painting. And one is to over reduce so that you can paint it and it, oxidizes on the cloth. That's one way. And another way to get blue is to use Mayan blue. We use other versions of blue that I get actually from France. And it's already reduced. I mean, it's actually a pigment. It's not a dye at that stage. And so I can paint with it. So it gives you some ideas of how we use the color and the sort of design. We really are designers with our dyes. We don't just dye solid things. We do painting and printing. And when we do painting, we use the pigments from France that are used, and they're just wonderful. And I learned from the Japanese that you should use soy milk to adhere it to the substrate, so we use soy milk and follow that process in detail. Now this is shibori. We do a lot of shibori. Obviously it's indigo, but the shibori, we just do clamp and folds. And I wanted for you as students especially to see the creative aspect of the dyes and not just always the technical. Yet another one, and some of these pieces are up here so that you can see it. And it was just a matter of using brushes and painting and printing and overlaying color. And because we have the Mayan blue, or because I over-reduce the indigo, I can paint with blue all the time. And that's really important to me, to be able to paint with it and not to submerge it all the time. More like an art picture. And here's just a collage of yet other fabrics, and I wanted to define them. So what I think is the most beautiful is the lower left, and that comes from Southeast Asia, Laos. The one on the right comes from India. Oh, no, that comes from Africa, sorry, where they tie off the little circles to get that technique. And the upper right piece is from Seattle in our studio. We just paint and print and using all forms of indigo, over-reduced indigo. And on the left is a shibori technique, again, used in West Africa. And now I'll move to cochineal. I need to move along here. Okay, so cochineal is one of the most prized dyes on the market, and it fluctuates in price dramatically. It just really depends on the crop itself. It depends on the nature of the people who sell it in general. And for those of you that may be aware of what's gone on, there was no ability for almost a year to get cochineal. The crop had failed. Well, I want to tell you the honest truth, that Nilda Calanyapa in Cusco runs a most beautiful and traditional textile place. She trains indigenous people in using their traditional dyes, whether from the Amazon, and we'll talk about the Amazon later. And so the most important thing for this cochineal was to kind of understand the cost. And there was a fight between Nilda's price, and there's a large manufacturer, right? An industrial manufacturer that also uses the indigo. But because she wouldn't pay his price, right? Then what she did was she did not grow a crop for 1 year. She hid other crops, so she then didn't have to sell to them. I mean, they lost their crops so that she wouldn't have to deal with it, and she could maintain her cochineal in her region. It's fairly political, and she's a very active woman. Do any of you know Nilda? So you understand, because this is her livelihood, and this is what she believes in totally for her people. So you can see as you read, it's collected every 3 months. And I think Roper from Germany is very active in that area. So people from Europe definitely go there. They have things grown for themselves, and so they can get the color that they want. And now that it's back on the market, it remains expensive. And now there's different varieties of the cochineal that they're able to get at least 2 or 3 different reds. The nopal cactus, this is how they grow. This happens to be in Oaxaca, where they protect the insects in a covered surface, and they live out their life. And ultimately, the little ones hatch, and they crawl out, and they're brushed off. Let me go through these. I'll put them all up at once, so you can look at the collecting of the bugs. So you can understand why it's so expensive, right? I mean, it's a laborious process. So you can see they can scrape it off and collect it and put it into a bag. I think the people in Ecuador have the most interesting way of collecting cochineal. They make a spindle whorl, essentially, right? And they put a piece of the cactus on there, and they kind of spin it around and then push it up with their hands to the top of the whorl, and then they have a little container. It's very hard. It takes them a long time to get enough cochineal that way. And then on the left, this is how they work in Oaxaca as well. Individual people, as opposed to larger groups, come and they just scrape the little bugs. They're very, very small. It takes hundreds and hundreds of them to actually, get a lot of dye, which is why it's so expensive on the market. Okay, and then the other way that they do it is they brush it off and put it into a can. and they secure it that way. This tells you the raw color of the cochineal bug. Okay. And the gravid females ready to give birth. That's the birthing process. And this is the seeding process. And I have to say, you know, for every 200 female bugs that are hatched, there's only one male. And I say, and he has to fertilize them. And I say, what a job, going from woman to woman. There you can see his is a little bigger there. And then this is where they dry them. This is what they look like and how you buy them. And I grind them up, and these are hand-woven pieces, excuse me, that show you the color of the cochineal, the resists we use, the kind of design. I think it gives you an idea. This is lac, this second red, which we find to be quite beautiful, and it supports indigenous people. It's in Bhutan, the monks work there. Okay, so I think, how are we time-wise? I think we've just, and then this is the matter. So thank you very much. Thank you very much. Questions?
Can you just speak to the humaneness or lack thereof of the cochineal, of using the bugs?
Well, they have a short lifespan anyway. You know, they give birth and then they die and go to the next stage. I think they're not cruelly treated. I can't tell you whether, in fact, the insects have those feelings, right, to think that it's a problem. So, you know, they don't think. I think it's an okay thing. You know, I can't tell you about that. I mean, I don't think it's an egregious thing to do. Their life cycle's short anyway. No one's ever asked me that question, and I don't consider it inhumane from my standpoint. And I've never interviewed a bug, so I don't have their standpoint either. I'm sorry to be sort of joking, but there's no response to that other than that, I think. Mm-hmm.
Michelle, I'm just wondering if you could share with us a little the process for over-reducing when you paint with indigo, or is that too technical to get into here?
Oh, when I over-reduce the indigo?
I'm fascinated by that process.
Oh, that I over-reduce it? Right, right. So that, I mean, the reason that I over-reduce is because often when I put something in, if it's a big, we dye so much and they're big containers and we do it by hand, and so it adds a lot of oxygen in there, right? And so if I over-reduce it a little bit, right, then I still have control of my vat. Does that make sense? So it's just if
I thought you were describing a process of actually painting indigo dye on cloth.
It's over-reduced indigo dye in order to do that.
Okay, I
you know, sometimes it's
not
in
that
the
you're
back.
painting something else over it after you've put the
Yeah,
indigo.
and if you over-reduce it, right, then I can paint with it. But I have to be this close, so I have to have a small kettle. I have to put it in the kettle. I have to rapidly move it over and paint with it, and I don't have much time.
I understand.
So I work very close, but that's how I do it.
Thank you.
Hello, Michelle. Thank you for that great presentation. I just wanted to ask you, you speak about indigenous people, and is Osage in the United States harvested by Native Americans, just like...
No, no. And it was only used by, to make bows and arrows, and that was the only. The Osage Indians, that was the primary use.
Okay.
But at this stage now, because it's invasive, it's been a real problem, and so now they're using it as a dye. So it has its own unique history.
Okay, thanks.
Anyone else?
Any more questions?
Thank you, Michelle. I would like to introduce our final speaker of the morning, Martin Bide. Martin is currently teaching at University of Rhode Island in a College of Human Science, Services, Textile, Fashion Merchandising, and Design program, and is a former president of AATCC. Thank you, Martin.
Thank you. Okay, so my talk is dyeing with synthetic dyes, although it's really not. I could probably spend a couple of semesters talking about dyeing with synthetic dyes, but it's so well established that my overview, and I'll explain why this is shortly, is looking back at the industrial use of natural dyes, the watershed year of 1856 and why synthetic dyes took over, and some thoughts on where we are today and the potential value of natural dyes. If ever I'm tempted to believe something I read on the web, my reality check is to go and search synthetic dyes and read some utter bollocks, as we say in England. It's about as accurate and truthful as this is. So I know there's a dark cloud hanging over the world of synthetic dyes, but most of it is not true. But if you've been hearing about them, as I said to David when I was signed up for this, I feel like I'm in the role of some Victorian villain in some melodrama, trying to defend the indefensible. Let me tell you where I'm coming from to be able to say what I'm going to say. There's a fresh-faced 40-year-since version of me in that picture of freshman as a colour chemistry major in the UK. Me and my colleagues had a great time studying dyes and textiles and dyeing and colour science. I liked being a student so much that I carried on and did a PhD and was in dye chemistry, and I'm sure you cannot appreciate the beauty in that. That took me about 6 months to make. But then I went to work for a company that made dyes, sadly no longer in existence, but this was on the wall of the company. It was in one of the new dye-making plants, but it was on the site of the old blue shed, which was formerly the Orkill shed. So this was a company that had its basis in the commercial production of natural dyes. Their head office was on Cudbear Street in Leeds. So the roots were there, definitely. We can skip forward a few years to where I am now. I have a very interesting department and colleagues at the University of Rhode Island. We have 20,000 items in our historic collection that other people look after and look out for. We have a long heritage. The American Industrial Revolution was founded by Samuel Slater. Slater Mill in Pawtucket is still an active museum. My colleagues set out to document quilts in Rhode Island. There's lots and lots of different ethnic roots in Rhode Island, and they all had their own quilting heritage. They all worked in textile mills. They used the scraps to bring home to make the quilts. And we published this book, and my chapter was trying to interpret how the printers of the time worked with natural dyes, the industrial application of natural dyes. So I came to appreciate the history of dyeing, originally as a secret art. Only the few would know, controlled by the guilds. But even at that stage, they would recognize that there was some pretty good dyes out there that were fast, grand teint. The less skillful dyers, the cheap guys, would apply petit teint colors that were not so fast. And we have a fairly restricted list of dyes that were recognized as grand teint, good ones. The original European home-based dyes, Dyer's Rocket for the yellows, Madder and Kermes for the red colors, and blue from Woad. And they had to use some very, very clever and varied chemistry to get these things to work. Incidentally, if you are out west now and you try and grow woad, you're growing a noxious weed. They're trying to eradicate it as much as they can. Dyes are valuable enough. We trade for them. I like to point out to audiences that the country Brazil is named because they found Brazil wood there. As they traded, they figured out that indigo was available. It's a more concentrated color than woad, and unusually for a natural dye, it was purified where it was grown and exported as a pure dye stuff and not as the plant material. Kermes from European sources was rare, so when the Spanish found cochineal in Mexico, that became a dominant color imported into Europe. Used to color Campari, and I think Starbucks recently tried to introduce cochineal into their drinks. I don't know why everyone objected. In America, people found a very good yellow dye, quercitron from oak bark, and there's a fascinating story behind this of Edward Bancroft, who had the rights to it, to export it back to England, and he also was a spy for both sides in the Revolutionary War. And he also wrote the book. And by about 1800, we're leaving the secrecy and the art, and we're getting more and more into the science and the chemistry of how to use these materials to get the best colors we possibly can. This is a book from 1790. I apologize, it's kind of fuzzy. John Pennington, Chemical and Economical Essays. And if you read that little bar in the middle, here's his cry. It's a pity that so few chemists are dyers and so few dyers are chemists. Recognizing right then that there's a link between the chemistry we need to make these things work and the people in the dye house. And luckily in Rhode Island, I have a great source of lots of historical documents and all these printers and dyers' notebooks looking at some of the wonderful work they could do with natural dyes, deposited mineral colors. And there's, the colors are great. The stories, if you read between the lines of this script, there's some very interesting stories in there. I always love the recipe that take 20 dozen eggs for the albumin to make the pigment stick onto the fabric. Again, wonderful results, super work. This is a quilt I like the look of a lot. Lots and lots of bright colors in there. But if these are extraordinarily messy processes. If you read back and see what it took to be able to do this, again, they were wonderfully clever chemists. But if you use madder on cotton, most of the time to get the reds and pinks, you need to have aluminum acetate as your mordant, and they made that by mixing up sugar of lead acetate, poison stuff. A lot of the bright yellows and printing were from lead chromate. Tin is not so nice in the environment anymore. Indigo, again, discharged with dichromate, and then treated again with lead acetate to make the lead chromate, so the yellow details on this middle panel would be lead chromate. So again, if you're picking up old quilts from the antique auctions, be careful what's on there. Printing indigo, enormously difficult, so they figured out a way to use arsenic sulfide as a way to reduce it. And women, there's always women, would lick the paintbrush, paint it on there. In the meantime, society is building more and more machines to make more and more textiles. And so again, we reached this watershed year of 1856 when what was then hazardous waste, coal tar, as a result of distilling coal gas to light factories, ended up giving us the first synthetic dye, the famous mauve. And as soon as people realize what can be done with mauve, everybody jumps on the bandwagon. And it's one of those eras when textiles is such an important facet of everyone's life that if you have a new technology and you can apply it to textiles, that's where you apply it first. But you eventually learn to apply these things other places. And so all the world's big, successful chemical companies, if you look back far enough, they probably started out in dye stuff chemistry. This is Perkins' first dye works, and that's what's on the site today. But the people who own that site mention it on their website that we're a window company, but. And so people realize what can be done, so immediately they start developing all these classes of synthetic dye. This is a BASF dye works in 1900 in Ludwigshafen, Germany. And all those different classes of dye are around today, but the individual members of those classes have been far superseded by newer and better products. So here's the key question. If I'm a dyer in the late 1800s, why do I jump onto this bandwagon? And the one that everyone assumes, straight up, so I'll mention it first, is that you can achieve some really bright colors with synthetic dyes. The other side of this story is you can get a pretty good black, too, with synthetic dyes, which is not an easy thing to do with natural dyes. Second big point for a dyer is I have a consistent supply. My local dye stuff manufacturer can send me the same stuff pretty much week in, week out, year in, year out, and if they're doing their job right, sometimes that's a big if, but if they're doing their job right, what they're sending me is going to be the same color, the same strength, and I'm going to get it every week. And so if I know my process and my recipe, I can use the same stuff in my dye bath and get the same result. I don't have to grind up a little sample of this, do a lab dyeing, see how strong it is, and adjust everything. And my customers don't get different colors every time. And that consistency argument even goes into natural dyes. The two most widely used natural dyes at the time, indigo and alizarin, which is the active ingredient in madder, were constructed synthetically in chemical factories and quickly supplanted the natural versions. Third reason why people jumped on this bandwagon, I don't have to grind up the wood, crush the plant, crush the bugs, do all that stuff to get the dye out of where it is into my dye bath. So I don't have to dispose of all that waste wood, the bug shells. I have lesser need for mordants, not zero, but less. And my processes are also a lot quicker. We'll say more about that. Another quote from the old dye printers' manuals. This is something that started on Friday night or Saturday. So I'm getting my bath ready to dye some indigo. And it's Tuesday, and we're really not sure if it's quite ready yet. Fourth reason, I can get all the colors from the same process in the same machine. So I've got my factory set up with a bunch of machines, and you order the color, and whatever you order, I do the same thing. So if I take, for example, direct dyes, whatever color you want, I mix up the right amount of the dye, which I hope is consistent, add it to the water and the fabric in the dye bath, heat it up, add some salt, stir it, wait an hour, 2 hours, and I'm done. Doesn't matter what the color is, I use the same process. And I can mix dyes in the process. I can mix my yellows and reds and blues and greens and create all the colors I want. If I'm working with natural dyes, they often have a different process for different dyes. So if I want to get a green with a natural dye system, and the only blue I have is indigo, life gets long and complicated. Another reason is that this took a while, but eventually they created pretty much all the colors in all the fastnesses. So if you want something that's going to be washed a lot, even though they didn't probably do that a lot in those days, or you want something to hang in a window and not fade, we can do that. It might cost you, but we can do that. So we can get all the fastnesses in all the colors. And since then, the big change in synthetic dyes has been in response to the development of synthetic fibers. So we now have polyester and the dyes, dispersed dyes associated with it. And for cotton, we have reactive dyes, which are comparatively new and are now the most widely used type of dyes for dyeing cotton. Yes, some early synthetic dyes were nasty. We recognize that they used carcinogens in manufacturing them. This always shows up at the dye maker's facility where they're shoveling tons of chemicals around. In the dye house where they're using teaspoons, the effect is far less, and in consumers where the dye is locked deep in the fabric, we rarely have problems. But we've gone beyond the natural dye industrial application, so we've never really looked at natural dyes and their processes in the same spotlight. You may have heard of the German azo dye ban. Again, these are dyes that we recognize if they ever did break down in the environment, might lead to the release of a small amount of potentially carcinogenic material. So we've gotten rid of those too. We're getting rid slowly of metal-containing dyes. We are almost away from mordant dyes. Depends which part of the world we're talking about. So we have a world dominated by synthetic dyes. And we are conscious of the effect we're having on the environment. So now the question becomes, here's why synthetic dyes took over, but why don't we go back and re-examine, reuse synthetic dyes, natural dyes? Well, we haven't really looked at them for all those chemicals, and even today I can read a lot of research papers that I pinched this from. I don't know why they're proposing this as a newly discovered natural dye, but we've got copper and tin and chrome and more tin as the range of mordants they're looking at in order to apply these colors. We wouldn't use the sugar of lead to make the aluminum acetate, but we've got to find it somewhere. These are very inefficient processes. We want to save water, we want to save energy. And everyone glories in the idea that it takes how many steps to make turkey red? I don't know what the latest big number is, but if you look back and it's 15, 20 different steps, all of which require rinsing and heating and doing all those things. Another minor reason that it would be hard to go back to natural dyes a lot is that cotton has become far more dominant and synthetic fibers have come along. Together, they account for about 90% of all the fibers we use. Wool is less than 1% of the market today. Those other fibers are not readily dyed with natural dyes. You can do it, but it's not easy. And so if ever you go to a natural dye workshop, overwhelmingly the fiber that people are dealing with is wool, which sucks up natural dyes very readily. It's a challenging statement. I've heard it said, I don't believe it, that you can achieve certain colors with natural dyes that you can't do with synthetics. I challenge that. Your ear can analyze a sound. You can hear a note and hear if it's played on a piano, a banjo, a trumpet, 3 instruments. You can analyze that sound and pick it apart. Your eye cannot analyze a color. All you see is a single color. So anything that you make with natural dyes, I can create the same color with synthetic dyes. The last time we used natural dyes industrially was about 1856, soon after. Agriculture was more or less organic. We'd started to mine fertilizer by then, and we were depleting guano deposits in South America. Our annual textile production was about 2.5 million tons. In other words, about less than 5 pounds per person per year. In the early 1900s, we've lived with the Haber process for creating synthetic nitrogen fertilizer. The proteins in your body contain nitrogen, and about half of the nitrogen in you came out of this process. It allowed us to fertilize fields, to grow more food, and because of that, our population has been allowed to grow. Without this, we wouldn't have 7 billion people on the planet. So here's the start of the Industrial Revolution. Here's where we're mining guano, and here's the 1800s, and then suddenly we have the Haber process in here, and this is where our population is going, where it is and where it's going. So going back to natural dyes is often paired with being organic, and it's assumed that organic is sustainable, but we cannot sustain a planet of 7 billion people organically. And forgive me, there's not enough shit. There's not enough manure to grow that much stuff. And the amount of textile we grow or use is not 5 pounds per person anymore. It's about 20 pounds per person on average in the world. But guess what? We are the champions. In the US, we consume about 90 pounds of textiles per person per year. We buy it, we wear it, we throw it. And we like it colored. So if we're now creating 70 million tons as opposed to 2.5 million tons of fiber per year, can we do that with natural dye? How far can we go with natural dyes to color all that huge mound of textiles? And 20 years ago, someone calculated that if you wanted to grow the dye to color the textiles that we were using in those days, you'd need about 1/3 of the world's agricultural land. and that number's probably gone up. How can we make natural dyes more productive? Maybe we can use synthetic fertilizer, or maybe we can genetically modify those to have more color in them. Well, how well does that fit with the ethos of natural, organic, pure, good, wholesome? And even a lot of the well-recognized ecological standards applied today, GOTS, the Global Organic Textile Standard, we've got bluesign to hear about. All the retailers have restricted substances lists. They all allow for the production of color with synthetic dyes. And so I was trying to think, well, why would I appreciate something dyed with natural dyes? And I was struggling to find the analogy. So here's my struggle. Natural wood furniture, synthetic plastic furniture. But I can see the difference. I can feel the difference. I can buy chicken from the supermarket. I can grow my own hens. And I can taste the difference. But if you hand me a piece of fabric and say, look, I dyed it with natural dyes, I'm going to go, great, but again, unless I do some really deep chemical analysis, I cannot tell that it's dyed with natural dyes. I don't get the benefit. So from my point of view, natural dyes have a great benefit in terms of keeping alive and recognizing the traditional methods, the very, very clever chemistry that dyers of 150 years ago used to get results from materials that nature threw at us but didn't really tell us, hey, here's a dye and it's going to be easy to use. So from my point of view, the value is in the process, not necessarily the result. The other thing people tend to assume is that synthetic dyes are oil-based. The oil's going to run out, so therefore synthetic dyes are not sustainable. Well, that applies to a whole bunch of things like plastics and pharmaceuticals and everything else. First point, I hate burning oil. I mean, I'm a chemist. I think it's a wonderful load of chemicals we have to use. And if we recycle them, we can make them last a whole bunch longer. But here's where we're going. When oil runs out, we're going to make all our stuff, including chemical intermediates, from renewable biomass resources. So that's the future. So my point is that for the foreseeable future, we're going to keep using safe, efficient, organically certified, sustainable synthetic dyes, and we're going to be able to color the vast tonnage of textiles that we like to produce and wear. How did I do?
So please, if anyone has any questions, which I'm sure there's going to be quite a few.
Are you moderating the questions? Are you going to pick the questioners?
So, yes, the mic.
Okay.
Yeah, I have a question. I picked up on the average American consumer buying 90 pounds of clothing a year.
Yep.
And the average American consumer throws away 68 pounds of clothing a year.
Mm-hmm.
So my question to you is the low cost, efficiency, and ease of use of synthetic dyes speeding up that process of throwing away consumption?
I'll try. Is the low cost of synthetic dyes speeding up this race to consume more, throw away more? I guess it's all part of the supply chain. It's all, it's the race to the cheap blouse, fast fashion, get it on the market, make it attractive, get it sold, get the next season stuff in. It's all part of that picture. But it's also part of the picture that says, I want to buy something that's going to last me for a long time. I want to buy a suit I'm going to wear for 5 years. It's just there. I don't think it's there.
It's kind of related to that question. It's not a coincidence that the dye stuff, the synthetic dye stuff exploded when the Industrial Revolution picked up pace and textile production picked up pace. It was,
Well, it took 80 years.
Right. Perkins lost his patent to the German guy or something like that almost, right? It became really a source of income to a lot of people to get into the dye stuff race. But I'm just wondering, I can see that we are heading maybe to a future where we will decide to scale back. I mean, you know, yes, the cheaper, more efficient, more mass-produced way is making it easier for all of us. But if it's really creating this glut of product, maybe we will.
Well, if we all used half of what we did today, we'd still be in a world of 35 million, which is 10 times what was being produced at that point, you know, 150 years ago.
But there is a room for both. I mean, you don't, from your background in chemistry and scientific way, you're not talking about the artistry of it, and you know, not seeing the differences in the dye, in the dyes. That struck me as really interesting because yes, some people can hear the tonal differences better than others, and maybe some artists can see the chromal variations better than others. Yes, to all intents and purposes, they look the same, but maybe the natural dye stuff will behave a little different, will age a little different, will have a certain life that the synthetic dye stuff may not, and some people may find value in that. So I think there's definitely room for both.
Well, there is, but again, you know, I can make you a color that fades if you want one. You know, I mean, I think you're making a virtue of necessity if you say that it's going to fade and change and evolve. I mean, you know, we all have our favorite old clothes that are not very different from the way they are when we bought them. And natural dyes will be a part of that as much as synthetic dyes, I think, will be a part of that. Just, yeah. Sorry.
I just wanted to ask, are synthetic dyes, or can they be biodegradable? And if not, like, what's the impact on the environment?
Ultimately, they degrade. And it depends if you're doing it aerobically or anaerobically. But they are very stable. In order to survive washing and sunlight and everything else, you know, they are pretty stable molecules. So they don't degrade, but they are, I mean, it's what happens to the drugs you ingest? Same thing. You know, they are not very degradable. You excrete most of them. They go down the drain, and they're in such tiny, tiny amounts that we forget about them. So they are very, very. I mean, go on.
I'm sorry. In terms of like, yeah, impact on the environment and stuff. So does it have a really
immeasurable?
Immeasurable.
Not measurable.
Really? Okay.
I mean, if
I'm just curious.
That's okay. If I was in a dye, if I'm in a, again, come back to the dye manufacturing versus dye application versus consumer use. If I'm at the dye manufacturing plant, I've got tons and tons of very, very powerful colored stuff. That's where any problems are going to arise. And if local people here might know about Toms River, New Jersey, where there's a dye stuff making plant, filthy. I mean, these were dirty operations, but it's hard to run them now in a filthy way. So they're made a lot more cleanly. And again, by the time we get to the dye house, the environmental regulations that surround most dye houses, and again, I've got to say that, you know, there's obviously room for improvement in India, China, everywhere else that's doing the low-cost stuff. But if you run a dye house in the US, you can't put red stuff down the river. You know, it doesn't happen that way. So.
Are you aware of any research on natural dyes in which they're being made more soluble, or I guess increasing the solubility? For instance, the synthetic dyes are far more soluble than the size of the molecules of the natural dyes. Are you aware of any research to fractionate those molecules of natural dyes to make them more soluble?
Solubility is not necessarily the key, but people have been looking at, in fact, I waved this book at you. It's called Dye Makers of Great Britain. It's the history of all the dye stuff manufacturers in the UK over hundreds of years. And I read this morning that one of the early things they did was to modify fustic to make it better, easier to use. So people are always doing that. I've read research that they're taking madder, which is a basic anthraquinone molecule, and getting the alizarin out of it and using that to make other dyes. So there is a genetic modification of natural dye plants to make them more productive. extraction methods for natural dyes. Yes, it's a great subject. If you're a young professor at a college around the world and you want to get published, it seems to be find something to do with natural dyes, and yes, you'll get it. You know, I review a lot of papers, and there's a constant stream.
Good, thank you.
Hi there. If one is using synthetic dyes in a small shop,
yep.
What's the do you know? Maybe somebody's already asked this question, but what's the best way to dispose of them responsibly?
Question number one, the answer number one is make sure your process is running as efficiently as possible, so that almost all of it ends up on the fabric and none of it goes down the drain. Talk with your local environmental department of whatever, so that there's no issues. And as far as I can figure out, most of the color regulations in this country even say no obvious or some other word like that, color. So if you're dyeing a yellow, a red, and a blue, wait till you've dyed all three. Mix them together so it looks like gray. And that is acceptable. But, you know, obey the rules is all I'm going to say. Obey the rules.
I just want to say one thing. That's the devil. Let's say I'm the deep blue sea. I'm the first woman that was in dyeing and finishing tech service for Monsanto. And here again, we can engineer anything you want. And I want to say to all of you, we need to save the universe. But in the quantity-driven society we're in, we have a sales and marketing situation where we don't have time to save the universe, but we want to save the universe. So those of you in synthetic dyeing, keep doing what you're doing. But the man-made synthetic fiber industry is not going to take this line down. Trust me. Okay?
So I'm around for the rest of the day, so I look forward to some interesting conversations.